Ew! Smells like it's time for another Shy Life podcast.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Good luck, studio.
Oh, it's the Shy Life podcast.
Oh, there's going to be some drama ahead.
All I wanted was a pie, and then I hatched out of an egg.
Okay, bring the mic over. He's ready to record.
Hello.
It's the quiet ones you've got to watch, you know.
Is it metaphorical? Is it deep? Is it deep?
Boy, he's not all that shy is right.
Blimey, Governor, it's the Shy Life podcast.
Hello, Paul.
Excellent.
634. Bonjour et bienvenue au podcast The Shy Life.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shy Life podcast with me, Paul the Shy Yeti. I was talking in the background. What's going on? Yes, hello. We're back again. Martin's here. Martin Holmes.
Hello.
How are you?
Chuckling.
You
can't help it. You made me chuckle before we came on air.
Oh, yes, I did. Sorry. Listeners, what are we going to be talking about this time? Well, we've run out of
Who knows?
We've run out of years. We could just, I could just talk to Martin about. We'll find that we're going to talk about the music of the 1910s or something. Except that there's nothing I could.
Hey, Jiminy heck!
We talk about.
I remember as the Titanic went down, the band were playing "Nearer My God to Thee." Yes.
You must remember it well, but.
Well, you know, it's my fault. I was steering the iceberg at the time.
Yeah. Well, we're going to pick up sort of, except we can't remember quite what we talked about last time.
We may not be. We can't remember what we talked about last time, so this may have no connection to anything we ever said before, or we might repeat ourselves.
Yeah, we might do. If you remember, listeners, after we finished the 1950s, we had an episode where we talked about. I wanted to help Martin.
Was it the theremin episode?
You're a very good theremin. You should appear on Dark Shadows.
Thank you very much.
I did feel bad because we started to talk about the 70s at one point, Martin and I, and we got to the point where he was getting quite excited, and I had to say, sorry, we've already done that. But so last time we spoke, last time we spoke, we kind of talked about the bands of the mid to late 70s, although we didn't get very far because it took quite a long time. So I'm hoping to sort of go roughly.
What was I going on a bit?
No, it's just that there were more bands.
Rabbiting on?
Well, we were kind of going through the big hits of, say, 1975 and stopping and talking about particular bands, but talking about their whole careers, and that did take longer than expected. But I'm just hoping we don't end up talking about the same ones again. But
we'll go for the one-hit wonders this time. I mean, they didn't have long careers. We'll go for the ones with the short careers. That won't take as much time off.
Well, let's run the theme music. When we come back, we'll get nattering again, and we'll see what we come up with, and hopefully not too many repeats. Yes, let's run that theme music.
Darling, it's the Shy Life podcast.
Yes, but it's a positive thing, Paul. The High Life, the Shy Life.
You won't find a cast of characters like this everywhere.
I'll go anywhere but potato.
Delicious. Hello, campers. How are you?
You quite like a big bang, don't you?
Go Shy Yeti.
Oh, I hope he hasn't found out my secret. Do you think he has?
I love the Yeti'S. It's my favourite thing.
If you thought that was bad, just listen to this.
Yeah, I'm strangely drawn to Yeti Uncle John's ankles as well.
I could eat my body weight in crisps every day.
Does anyone see my hot sausage?
It's all green and juicy and yum, 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 yum.
Oh, I can't wait for it to begin.
It's the Shy Life podcast.
I like that. Yeah.
Marvellous, Paul.
Hi there.
So we're back. Yes. I was thinking about, even people like David Bowie. I don't think we have talked about David Bowie as that's an episode in itself, really. I mean, 1975 was a weird year because that's when Space Oddity was But it says that's when it was number one. Was it when did it not get to number one the first time round? I know it charted in the late 60s.
Oh, you know more. It's funny. I hesitate to say this because people take you outside and beat you with sticks. But I was never a huge Bowie fan. It's funny enough. I like the Bowie I've got, but and I seem to have some Bowie vinyl, but I don't. I think I acquired that. I don't think I necessarily bought it, which sometimes happens with record collections. Things sort of end up with you. So I think we've got Diamond Dogs somewhere on the shelf. My sister had Bowie pin-ups in her record collection, so I would have been familiar with Bowie. But when there was a great outpouring when Bowie died. Bowie. It's a whole episode on how do you pronounce his name. But there's I didn't feel any. People were really upset, and I didn't feel that connection. I've got the single. I heard the singles. But I was never a big sort of Bowie follower, so I didn't feel that hole in the world that people do feel about Bowie, and yet. He did have an incredible career, and the more you sort of unravel it and the more you discover, the more interesting it becomes. I mean, specifically, one of the things that got me into the Bowie mindset, oddly enough, two things, but one thing specifically was Live Aid. Because he did Heroes on Live Aid, and then there was that duet with Mick Jagger, and I did buy the single of that. But there was also Absolute Beginners. I have the 7-inch single of Absolute Beginners, so I sort of came to Bowie in that sort of late 80s period. At the same time, weirdly, when I also properly discovered the Rolling Stones again, the Jagger connection. But they were both sort of. I was a rubbish music buyer, and my sister bought pop before that. So I think my first LP purchase was Judas Priest, and people were desperate. When I had school friends, they were desperate for me to show interest in any kind of music at all because it kind of passed me by. I didn't buy LPs. I didn't, it was weird. I listened to my sister's stuff, and my sister was 9 years older than me, so I didn't spend my pocket money on records like people of my generation are supposed to have done. Later on I did, but at that stage I didn't really do that. So I didn't discover Bowie. I remember going to somebody's house, elder sister, for some reason we were in the elder sister's bedroom, let's not dwell, but the walls were plastered with T-Rex posters, Mark Bolan posters. And the whole play, it was like you couldn't see the wallpaper for these posters. And I'd never heard of the guy.
I feel like we would have talked about T-Rex when we talked about the individual years. But
yes.
I think the trouble is he wasn't having hits at this stage. But there are some...
No, but I would have watched... See, that's the thing. Because I watched television a lot, I watched his Bolan serial, Mark series that was on. So I tended to see things like Supersonic, the ITV pop music programs that were on. I watched. So Supersonic was on. Lift Off with Asia, like I say, Mark. The bass. I would have probably watched Shang-a-Lang, and that thing that Roy North did. It was all those things. I saw the pop acts, but I saw the pop acts through the lens of television. I didn't really sort of seek them out. I wasn't an avid Top of the Pops listener. I think we did mention last time Suzi Quatro, and I was very aware of Suzi Quatro. Maybe it's because I was a teenage boy, and but I was very aware of acts like that. I was very aware. I think I've talked about this before, but I had we did school projects, and I had the Look-In holiday special or whatever it was, and we did articles based on this. So people like David Essex would be on the cover, or Mud, or Shwaddy Waddy. So those sort of acts were around, and I was aware of them. But I don't think I necessarily was aware of them as music. I was aware of them as
features in a magazine, if that's not a completely weird way of looking at
doing these episodes, I often find myself wandering off. I did download quite a few Suzi Quatro albums and listened to at least one or two of the early ones and found some good album tracks. And the other day there was somebody tweeted a David Essex song called Lamplight, which I found out was like a top 7 hit, but I'd never heard it, and it was quite weird for it's not the typical David Essex singer. There's one or two around that sort of 74, 75 time.
Well, I know that we talked about last time, because I always find myself adding things to my Amazon wish list, and I found that whatever last time, I must have added there's 2 Mud LPs I've added to the maybe buy one day list. So I was obviously I enjoyed Mud. Mud were fun, but there were lots of acts like that I was aware of. Like I say, Alvin Stardust, all these we were aware of, but I didn't go out and buy their stuff. It was just peculiar that. But of course there were some big because my sister was like 9 years older, so in about 1976 I'd have been 12, so she'd have been in 20, 21, years old. So she was going out and buying LPs. So she bought something like, one of the LPs we still have is the New Goodies LP, because the Goodies were on Top of the Pops a lot. So my sister bought the music, and I just basically stole it.
Yeah, I didn't have anyone to steal music from, unfortunately. But
no, that's the big brother syndrome. You see, being the little brother, you always get to nick your big. Your elder siblings' music collection.
So David Bowie. Space Oddity was number 5 when it was first released, and then it was number 1 when it was really re-released in 75. I suppose I should tell you my way in with. I'm a bit like you. I was. Thank you. I've been bought tea.
You have servants.
Yeah. I was kind of upset when he died, but there was a few songs that he released, because he did that where he kind of released an album and then died the next day or something like that.
Right.
And those albums, really, I like 70s Bowie. I think with some exceptions and some singles that I like, but I think after. Scary Monsters, Super Freaks. If that's Scary Monsters, and that's the single I get confused as to whether the album that has Ashes to Ashes on. Anyway,
which I've got the double CD of the singles collection, which I think is the only Bowie I've got on CD actually. Which is probably makes me shallow as heck, and all the Bowie fans will be rolling their eyes. But what I mean is that I don't think there's a Duff track on it. And it's funny because something comes up on Pointless, and I'm thinking, the question comes up on Pointless, and I'm going TVC 15, and like people are going, what? That'll be a pointless answer, and of course it is. But but it's just, and I'm thinking, how do I know a track like that when I probably couldn't.
I think basically I like the more upbeat tracks. So the more worthy. Songs that people love around the time he died, I'm kind of like, I've just not grown up enough to enjoy this.
Well, I suppose the other thing is that I was a student in the first half of the 80s, the early to mid 80s, shall we say, and that's when I was doing my studenty thing. So obviously there were student events at which I played music, so I was more familiar with the sort of blue jean period, if you see what I mean. That sort of like resurgence, that 80s resurgence period, really, from Ashes to Ashes on. It's kind of, that was the Bowie I was familiar with, and I knew the songs from. But like I say, it wasn't that I went out and bought them myself. I enjoyed them, but I didn't enjoy them enough to buy the LPs.
I don't think I bought any collections, let alone albums of him until the mid-90s. I used to listen. I finished university in Birmingham, went back home for 6 months and applied for jobs, and finally got a 6-month job back in Birmingham, and moved back literally to the same
digs that I'd lived in, but just without any of my university friends there. And then for 6 months, and unfortunately, I could have stayed there longer, but unfortunately, it did turn out to be just a 6-month job. But for 6 months, I commuted from my old house on the bus round to from Erdington to West Bromwich, and that was around the time when Chris Evans was doing his radio station when he first did it, which then also led to him doing TFI Friday, and he was when he was everywhere. And he was playing. One day he played Suffragette City, which wasn't a Bowie song that I knew.
Yes,
and I really liked that, and that made me go and buy the greatest hits.
Right, and
then back by about '96, somewhere I heard the album track called Andy Warhol, which is a weird song compared, and it's on Hunky Dory, and Hunky Dory is probably still my favourite Bowie album. But I went through the stage of really liking most of the '70s albums. Some of them I didn't like. You mentioned Diamond Dogs, and I never clicked with Diamond Dogs in my '90s period. But when he died, I decided to go back to some of those '70s albums that and Diamond Dogs that's when I fell in love with Diamond Dogs. Was in 2016, whenever it was.
Well, I always come to things late. I mean, I came to Led Zeppelin late. It's weird. People will be listening to albums for years, and it just would pass me by. I mean, the poetry of the words. I love words, and yet for some reason I never saw it in the music until much later. So all the stuff that people tell me about the insight and all that stuff, that they've known forever, it's new to me, really, because I suddenly discover this stuff and go, gosh, that's an amazing lyric, that's an amazing piece of wordplay. But it completely and utterly passed me by until these more recent years. And I don't know how I sometimes how I sometimes miss these things. That's the thing that always surprises me, is that these things are so ubiquitous, and people, it's all over the place, really, really love these musicians, and yet I just sort of managed not to notice them. I was the same with the Smiths. People played the Smiths all around me when I was a student, and I went home having finished my education, as it was, and without any Smiths LPs, but the nostalgia of other people having had them, I went out and bought some. But at the time, I was probably quite dismissive about these things. It's kind of peculiar how blinkered I can be about music, I find.
This will make you chuckle. One of my I don't know why, but one of my favourite David Bowie songs from the '70s is "John, I'm Only Dancing."
Right.
And I wrote when I was doing my
Yeti Uncle John, I'm Only Dancing.
Well, yeah, that could be another. But I did. When I did my live poetry shows, I ended up sort of having a guest poet,
right,
called John Smallshaw, and I wrote a poem called "John, I'm Only Rhyming."
Right.
And it was because John Smallshaw also uses rhyme quite a lot. I use rhyme quite a lot.
Okay.
Not exclusively, but I enjoyed writing with rhyme because people were sort of set to say it's
quite dismissive.
Other poets don't like it, but listeners often do like it. I think the thing is, there's lots of bad rhyming poetry out there. The trick is not to do the bad sort. The trick is to spend the time to make it the good sort.
Yes.
And it's actually probably harder to write a good rhyming poem than it is just to write free verse. So
yes.
don't dismiss it. Actually try and make it good. Don't just, are you not up to the, you're a poet. You should be able to write all sorts of different poetry.
Precisely.
So I was quite sort of standing up for rhyming, and John was using rhyme. So I wrote a poem called "John, I'm Only Rhyming," and it was literally making the mickey slightly out of people who look down on rhyming, because the thing that if you're only sitting there with other poets, fair enough, but my experience was that people who don't like poetry or wouldn't say they were fans of poetry, they liked my poetry because
They understood it.
Rhyme. Well, it did rhyme. So, the fact that some people have said that to me again made me think it's not as clear cut as don't write rhyming poetry, because actually some of your potential audience do like it, and it's actually hard to do it well. Yeah. So that's a challenge, and I certainly didn't succeed with every poem I did, but I think I ended up feeling, and getting into arguments, which I don't usually get with people who sort of, there was some sort of a competition, and they were like, don't use rhyming poetry in it, and I'm like, so what? Why? What why have you got this?
I think we're all fond of a good pause or a well placed break in a line. I think that's a very good part of poetry generally. The interesting thing to me was that the only time I ever went to a poetry reading night, I was obviously a bit drunk, but I just remember very, very clearly just loving the fact that there were arguments breaking out over poetry in whatever it was, 1990, whatever. I just thought, this is, in many ways, this is so the coffee bars of the 17th century. It's Byron challenging everyone to a duel. It felt, oh God, people are arguing, but they're arguing about poetry. Isn't that a wonderful thing? They're not arguing about politics or other horrible stuff. They were arguing about poetry. I just thought that was, or the content of poetry. I just thought it was a wonderful thing. And maybe I could say I was feeling particularly mellow. I don't know. I'm not usually comfortable with people arguing about anything. But, but that was just, that was sublime. That really was.
Yeah, I mean, the sorts of poems I wrote often suited rhyme, because they were more comedy. They could be quite macabre sometimes, but they were quite comedy based.
Did you set any of them to music? Did you ever find a musician who would accompany you with it?
I did get, well, I've kind of sort of done that more recently, occasionally, but my friend Harry and I have done that just this year, although we haven't got around to recording it yet. But I
get out your little ukulele and...
Well, I did do my, I think I've talked about this before, I did the... I lost my heart to a Cornish pasty or whatever. When I was down at a folk festival, I kind of wrote a spoof folk song, but yeah, I mean.
You mean you've never dared to sort of do a karaoke night but sing your own words?
Well, I did do a spoof on "I Will Survive." And I did "I Will Eat Pies," and
were there tomatoes flung?
They did make me sing it once, but I generally, it wasn't that I couldn't sing, not that I can sing well, but it was more the nerves of singing that made me not want to sing it. There was certainly a point where probably the most well-known poet in Britain was Pam Ayres. She's still on TV because of her poetry. She's doing a Channel 5 show just recently. She's still a famous face.
Yes.
To a certain extent, off the back of doing poetry. And,
yes.
And most of her poems, as far as I can remember, or the ones I read, have been rhyming ones. So it just shows that rhyming isn't all bad, but may not get you critical success, but might get you success.
But doesn't get published in the anthologies. That's why you publish your own, Paul.
Yes, well, I never like that where you kind of, send us some of your poems, £5 a poem. Oh, who's making the money here? And who are you actually? Who? It's a bit like with our podcasts. If we kind of got collaborators or contributors, and we sort of charged them to be, you can be on our show, but you've got to give us a £5, and they'd be like, sorry, why would you want to do that? Who are you? Yeah. I mean, we'd never think of charging our collaborators or contributors to be on our show, but in the poetry world, a lot of it is to do with...
But I'd just like to point out to listeners to Paul's show, mugs are indeed available.
I have got mugs, yes. I've got a Shy Life podcast mug. I've got a little notepad here. I've got stickers.
So far, the only person who's bought them is yourself, isn't it?
I know, but I wanted some Shy Life podcast merchandise. This handsome chap on this mug.
You're braver than me. You're braver than me. I mean, I'm not quite sure I can justify it yet. But, okay.
Well, I mean, it doesn't cost anything for them to exist on the website. So, and there's a baseball cap on its way. But now, moving on to
I don't think we've talked about, for instance, Roxy Music. Do you have any opinions on Roxy Music?
Oh, well, Roxy Music are, again, they're one of those bands. It's weird. I probably have more Brian Ferry stuff than Roxy Music stuff. I always forget how early Roxy Music were doing their thing. Because they sort of crop up, and it's about 72, isn't it? They're really
early.
That's
right. Yeah.
And I always sort of associate them with the late 70s, but they've been around for they're an old band by that stage.
Well, we were talking about. We were roughly last time talking around 1975, although we're going off on tangents. And 75 was the year they released their 5th album, and that's when they kind of stopped. I don't know now whether they officially said, right, we're stopping, but they didn't do another album until 79, and that's it's like the two halves, although there were more albums in the first half.
Well, I'm always amazed how, like I say, the roots of Roxy Music, just how deep they go, how far back they go, and it's always interesting to me that you put a glam collection together, and Roxy Music are part of glam, because I don't think of them as part of glam at all, because the era I was more familiar with was when they'd sort of got rid of the spangles, and they started wearing suits.
But I do like both eras. I mean, of the later period, the single Angel Eyes is one of those things where, funnily, it's one of my favourite Roxy Music singles, but it's also...
That's sort of the song rock, though, isn't it? Yeah.
But the song Angel Eyes by ABBA is one of my favourite ABBA songs, and they both came out the same year.
And, of course, one of the favourite characters in The Good, the Bad and the Ugly.
But
maybe not.
Let me see. Sometimes I get tripped up with what's a Roxy Music single and what's it's almost like something you'd have on a quiz or on a quiz machine. Roxy Music or Brian Ferry single,
right.
And you'd have to press because I think there was one that I got tripped up with when I was doing a quiz with Callum recently, because I always think that because their cover of Jealous Guy after John Lennon died, which was one of their biggest hits ultimately, it was a number one in 81, and I was kind of think that's a Brian Ferry track, but it actually was released. It's not. It's a non-album single, but it was a Roxy Music single. Because Brian Ferry often used to do cover versions of classic songs, and still does to this day.
They come very much from the tradition of the art school band, don't they? That's the interesting thing to me about... I mean, I don't know whether they went to art school or not, but there's that thing in some bands of the era where they had a very uniform look and everybody wore similar clothes. It was almost like they were one of those bands where everybody was being an individual, and again, you get that with the Bowie people as well. There's a kind of there's like the guy in the jacket and bow tie in the middle of the stage, and then everybody else. It looks like there's been an explosion in a clothing factory. It's an interesting way of going, I find.
Yeah, I mean it's quite a big change. If you see them on Old Grey Whistle Test early on, and then you see them 5 years later.
There's just a kind of, I don't know, there seemed to be a thing where people got to the sort of, mid-80s, and they looked at the photographs of themselves 10 years ago and thought, God, what were we wearing? And suddenly they all turn up in black jeans and black T-shirts.
Well, I mean, I've said that before about kind of the only real musical, era I was part of was Britpop when I was at university, and that's not necessarily... I mean, I do look, in some part I look younger, but basically I'm wearing jeans and T-shirt, except for the time I decided to cut my own fringe, because I couldn't afford the hairdresser, and really that's all I cut was the fringe. I didn't...
It's the only bit you could see.
Stupid. yeah, I could see, but but there aren't that many, what I would say, compared to like people who were goths or a lot of people who were around in the early 80s, perhaps new romantic people, or there are some bands that you follow where the fashion when you look back at the photos. Or if you were a real punk and you got pictures of yourself with a Mohican. I don't have anything really like that. I might have dressed up as something silly for Sutton Park, but that's slightly different because I wasn't wearing that all the time. I say that with a mixture of sadness and relief that the silly photos of me are. I knew I was being silly when I did them. But
most of your clothing choices were very mainstream. Is that what you're saying?
They were, because
you weren't an eccentric.
You
just
wasn't a rebel. I'd say I wasn't a rebel because I let my parents buy my clothes for me from the Grattan catalogue, because my dad doesn't like jeans to this day, but I didn't really own a pair of jeans until I that was me rebelling, buying a pair of jeans like after I'd left university.
Are there many pictures of you then in tank tops and penny round collars and things like that? Or are you a bit late for that?
Probably a bit late for that. I mean, there probably are some 70 me in as a little one. In her later life, my mother always lamented the fact that I only ever seemed to buy black clothes. And she always wanted me to wear more colours. But the thing was, my mother wore horrendously loud clothes. For whatever reason she chose to do that. But when I was a child, my mother obviously bought all my shirts, and there are some god-awful shirts in photographs. Flowers, bloody cowboys and Indians. If it was the most inappropriate shirt for me to wear, she would buy it, bless her. I always remember Jarvis Cocker saying how his mother made him wear like lederhosen. And I think I always thought...
Well, she never went that far, to be fair.
I always imagined Jarvis Cocker's mother being... Perhaps she was an older lady, but I found out more recently, reading his recent book about... where he's going through all the bit junk and bric-a-brac that he kept up in his loft. If anything, she was quite a youngish mum, so it's kind of even more surprising that she must have known that wasn't going to be embarrassing, but maybe it came down to finances. But
maybe it did. I don't know. I mean, it's true how many students did most of their shopping in the thrift stores, So it's. I used to sort of look for some strange clothes, but they would, mostly for parties. Actually, to be fair, I was very conservative. I always think, I was possibly the least arty art school graduate there's ever been. I just didn't. I didn't discover Bowie. I walked around in jackets and ties. Maybe that in itself was a statement, but I almost felt it was not a statement. It was just I didn't know how to rebel, so I just didn't.
I was known for liking, within my world of people. I was known for liking ABBA and the Beatles during the 80s, or during the mid part of the after ABBA.
You're anachronistic, Paul.
Well, I could probably get away with the Beatles more. That ABBA wasn't popular after they split amongst young people. It was always people's mothers who said, I like ABBA, which didn't really help. But the Beatles you could get away with. I remember winning some sort of prize at school for English, and there being some books, and being able to pick a book, and I picked a book about. This would be in 1987 because it was when it was 20 years ago today, since Sergeant Pepper, and I chose that book, and my English teacher wasn't that happy about that because he obviously didn't see. He probably saw that as that's a music prize, not an English prize. But to me, what I liked about the Beatles partly would have been the lyrics, and I would have thought. I mean, that's where my love of poetry comes from. Is more song lyrics than other poet. I mean, my dislike of poetry and my love of lyrics is where I come from. I hated the poetry we studied at school, and I started writing spoof poetry of like Sylvia Plath and things like that, because I thought you know, you just put a load of words on the page and say there's a reason to it, and that kind of that sort of made me think. Well, you could have a character in a story who writes all sorts of poetry.
Yeah.
And she hates what she writes, but she knows that some people, or she kind of likes the tricking people into thinking there's a meaning to. I did sort of have a character like that in one of my stories.
Well, classical poetry can still be quite obtuse, can't it? But I think the interesting thing is that, you know, despite maybe being a very, you know, conservative, small conservative person in terms of, like you say, being still dressed by your mother, but it takes a lot of gumption to go and stand on a stage and read out your poems. I mean, I don't know how much older you were, but it's still, and that is, you know, that is borderline avant-garde. I mean, the interesting thing about what you were saying about ABBA and the Beatles in the era you were listening to ABBA and the Beatles when nobody else was, is that people were circling that with things like the Nolans, and the Nolans was nothing like that, but that was what people were thinking. It's that sort of circle of music, you know.
It's like when steps were popular in the late 90s, people say, oh, steps are like ABBA on acid. And I mean, steps have proven their worth to some extent in that they still exist, but they must know that they're not of that league. No. But you know, fun enough if you're in the right mood. But
well, enough real musicians now will tell you that the actual music that Bjorn and Benny write is really technically very good, just structurally very good music, and they'll tell you that now. They might at the time have grudgingly accepted it, but I suppose what you've got to remember is this is running in parallel with punk, where if you could hold a guitar, you were on stage. And, you know, you didn't have to know any chords if necessary. You know, I mean, I know there's an awful lot more musical skill in actually the punk bands that survived, but it had democratized music. And so anybody who felt like they could do it gave it a go. Quite a few fell by the wayside, and there were some very good musicians came out of that era. But there was that sense that the technical side of music was old hat. I mean, you think about the late 70s, and you've got prog rock still happening. You've got people like Queen doing these, you know, incredible musical structures, but then realizing that to sell records they have to do something a bit more basic, but still technically very well done. Let's say you've got ABBA in the early 80s still just about hanging on, but they are the skill of music. It's funny, because we live in an era where we're supposed to not respect experts, where anybody can do anything and everything like that. But we try and de-skill quite a lot of things. But actually, we still appreciate the people who are actually, you know, there are people who are quite good at this stuff, and sometimes we dismiss them at our peril. You know,
I mean, it's funny because there are people, even though it wasn't a big hit for ABBA. In fact, I think Blancmange did a cover version and got it higher. The Day Before You Came by ABBA, some people would say have said like it's their best song, and other people have said no, not the sort of ABBA I like at all. It's very Marmite. I mean, I like it. I think it is one of the best.
But
songs.
You can't dance around the kitchen to it.
No. Yeah. But then Dancing Queen isn't my favourite ABBA song by any means. But it's partly that, which kind of brings us to the sort of songs that are played so much that you would care if you never heard them again. I'm not sure I'd go that far with Dancing Queen. I think I would still like. But for instance, if I never heard Bohemian Rhapsody again, as great a song as it is, I don't think I would mind if I didn't.
Well, the thing about that is you could probably do a reasonable version of it in your mind because you heard it so
exactly,
much.
Yeah.
If you're on your desert island, you wouldn't need to hear it. You could just imagine it because it's so familiar. It is interesting. We're going through the earworm period, and it was funny because. Inappropriate though it may be, when we had the royal funeral recently, for some reason, and I know it sounds terrible, but I woke up and the tune that was going through my head was Going Underground. Now, you know, you could say that's that's the horrible thing to say, but that was the tune that I just could not get out of my head that morning. It was just, and that's the jam it just sticks in your head. And I get this with lots of tunes. I sometimes find that actually a tune is so stuck in my head that I have to go and track down the CD to play it, and that sort of releases it. I don't know if you've ever had that, but I mean, I've got certain collections like I can chop vegetables to when I'm cooking, and the compilation albums, and I know purely from the last bars of one song what the next song is going to be because of the familiarity of that compilation and in that order. And if I put it on random, it would throw me completely. But the strange thing is that these things lock into your head. So, some days you really do wake up and think, I've really got to listen to some Jam today, or some Smiths today, or some ABBA today, or it just seems to be your subconscious is almost like saying, there's this in here, you need to listen to this. And,
yeah,
maybe that's what happens.
I still are constantly on the search for either old songs that are new to me or just new songs, not necessarily.
Well, I've spent a long time
artists.
thinking someone like, I genuinely was a bit sick to death. I used to buy quite a few of his LPs, but I got a bit sick to death of Elton John. Got very sick to death of him. And despite the fact I had some CDs on the shelf or some LPs on the other shelf, I didn't really play any. And then I watched Rocket Man, and I just sat there thinking, God, these songs are good. And over the course of the next week, I just sort of listened to everything I had again. And it was like listening to it for the first time, because suddenly, my eyes have been opened to actually all this stuff that's on my shelf that I've been ignoring. There's some pretty good stuff in there.
In your case, it made you go back to what niggles me is that it's like dipping in. It's like for people who don't know much about Elton John, it's like dipping in. Oh, look, there's some good songs. I remember that one, and it's all the mainstream ones, and it's.
But an album like my sister had "Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player" and "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road" when I was growing up, and "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road" has got some fabulous stuff that's not singles on it. It's even that "Funeral for a Friend" opening is just kind of wonderful, and that's a bit almost sort of steps into prog rock, But that's the funny thing. Do you still discover bands now that you've not heard anything of?
Old ones or new? I'm still discovering new bands.
I know I've got, for example, because I bought them because I was talking about it with someone at work. I've got a set of Sisters of Mercy album, which I listened to once and I thought was, interesting. But I've got LPs like people like Hot House Flowers, or stuff like that that's probably I've not heard in years, but when I put it on, it's just that's really interesting. Tanita Tikaram from the sort of mid-80s, and these were sort of stuff that I was buying when I was a student or shortly after I was a student. Those few years when I actually had income and no mortgage.
I mean, it does help that I sort of was probably buying singles regularly until into the tens, but then pop went for. I liked like in the noughties, as well as liking some indie bands or rock bands. I liked electropop. I like. They went through a stage where everything was kind of a little bit electric, a little bit sort of. Even the pop, it wasn't sort of Whitney Houston ballads. It was quite clever and quite upbeat, and I really liked electric pop. And then it went in the mid 2010s. Everything went a bit minimal. I like lots of in my pop music. I like lots of little squiggly noises in the background and production. I like a lot of production. And it all went a bit minimal. And then around 2020, it sort of emerged, and it was back to how I liked it. And I kind of lost interest a lot, other than the odd, album by maybe an established band I knew or singer. But I have a friend called Adam who's on a show called Foul Monkeys in the States, and he's in his mid 30s, and he's into pop. And we discovered we had some things in common as far as
our musical tastes from the noughties and stuff.
Yeah.
And we talk about, and then he'll sort of say, "Oh, you should listen to. Have you listened to this?" Or you should, and it got me back into the habit of listening. And I discovered there were some new people I didn't know, and it's really helped. And now I think partly my ears are back tuned into what I like, and also YouTube knows the sort of, and it kind of recommends things, and sometimes it misses, and sometimes I'm finding it's not always people recommending. I'm actually finding some things, and my friend Callum, I think he listens to a podcast or something which has like new songs. He's more into rock, but he does listen. He's aware, and if he hears something with a female vocalist or something he thinks I'll like, there's a band called Wet Leg who are a bit quirky, a bit B-52s-y, one of my younger friends who's like in his early 30s, he went to a Spanish music festival and Wet Leg were there, and he said they were really great live, and it reminded me of when I used to go to gigs, and it makes me happy that, I mean, they're not the sort of band, I don't think they have a top 40 hit, but their album I think was number one. So it's just harder to find some of these things, and yet not if you know where to look.
Well, my mate Sandy's always trying to sort of persuade me about music, because he goes to a lot of gigs, you know, and he still does, and he still discovers new music, and he still goes and sees gigs of bands he's known for 20, 30 years. He's so occasionally when he gives me lifts, there's a CD on. So I tend to discover new music through other people these days. The fascinating thing to me is how often, and again, this sounds really naff. I mean, when you think about Muzak, you think about, but actually quite often I've just been in a supermarket and heard a song and thought, oh, I'd like to hear more of that, you know. Or the really weird route to music, which most people I think would find dreadful and think, God, this is so bland and terrible. But I actually find that if I just hear something on an advert, you know, it can send me finding all sorts of new stuff. Not so much soundtracks anymore, because soundtracks seem to be much more structured. But you know, I will discover a new band because they happen to be on the soundtrack of this film or that film. But generally speaking, I actually now find that something on an advert, or even, you know, if you're sitting eating your meal and you're in a restaurant, and sometimes restaurants just put on a CD or a piece of music or a channel, and you just think, wow, that's good, I'd like to hear more of that. And that's now my route to new music. It's because I don't really listen to music radio very much.
I mean, that's inspired me to think of two things. I hope I don't forget the second thing. But when I play the computer game Fortnite with Warren and Troby and Yeti'S John,
your kids and your video game.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
When you get in the taxis or the cars, there's music playing on the radio which you can mute or listen to. Right. And I have heard one or two songs that I really like, but unfortunately they don't tell you what you're listening to. So I have to try and remember a snatch of lyrics and Google it when I come back out. That seems like a lost opportunity. But my bugbear, and this is probably almost something for Vision on Sound as much as as these episodes that we're doing today are quite rangy. We can go off on any time. One of my bugbears is pop songs that appear to add some sort of gravitas or something to a sad scene, or it happens a lot on Home and Away. It happened on Neighbours, but I've even seen it on EastEnders, and so I think it's creeping in everywhere. Where someone's sad, and you get some awful sort of guitar, some sad boy singing a sad song because that person's sad. This is just to emphasise this is sad.
In case you haven't worked out how sad it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less bothered if it's like we're happy. It's more trying to make a sad scene sadder by having a sad song about how someone's very sad. That bothers me more than if they were going to a party or they were really happy about something.
Although I got very wound up about they were using it on a BBC trailer a few months ago, the Les Fleurs, the Minnie Riperton. It took me ages to first remember which thing I'd seen it on. I heard it in a pub. And I thought, oh, that's that song I really like that I'd heard on that advert. And I couldn't remember what advert it was for. And it took me days to work out it was on a BBC promo. But yeah, when I finally tracked it down, yeah, that's the one. That's the one I wanted to hear. But
I think this. I was mentioning this on one of your shows that because we've got Disney Plus. I've been watching the later seasons of Walking Dead, which past the point where I gave up because it's there, so I might as well. And at least it's got zombies in. But it has been hard work. But I've noticed and I don't remember. I'm on season 10, which is they're currently doing season 11. But I think because of the pandemic, season 11's gone on for decades. But but season 10 seems to have, and I don't remember it in previous seasons. Like again, that seems to have the we're sad, so there's a sad song, and it feels even I can almost accept it in the soap operas because I'm sort of used to that now.
Yes,
and almost some of the soap operas, and they've probably been doing songs in Neighbours and Home and Away, etc. For quite a long time. In some ways, or they at least have had characters who have turned out to have definitely Neighbours who were singers. The characters were that they were a singer, but it was also hopefully to promote their careers.
Yes.
But having that sort of thing on Walking Dead, just that seemed. When I noticed that the other day, that seemed weird because I didn't feel like it was that sort of show where you'd have a song to show that people are sad or. Yes. I feel like that might have come in. That might not have been the case before that season. I don't think it adds anything. In fact, I'm just kind of like, well, you know, where's this?
You don't need to be told how to feel.
Yeah. And also, I'm thinking, whereas the song isn't playing in real time, so we're hearing it as viewers. And it's set in a time where there would be no more music or no recorded music. Not that matters because it isn't playing live, but it messes my head up. It just doesn't. It's like if they suddenly had. Well, I guess they do. They did occasionally have a pop song. That David Tennant one with the Master. They had. They were, but I think I can't. I feel like that was playing in a. Like the Master was all excited and playing some music, but it would be weird if suddenly we had, like, you know, are we going to have Jodie regenerating and, like, Adele comes in the background to sort of...
Isn't it rumoured to be someone like Coldplay?
yeah, I mean...
God help us.
this might already have happened and I've missed it, but I don't think we need... Let's just stick to instrument... You know, with Doctor Who particularly, let's stick to instrumental pieces if you have to have music... But look, I want to move on because I was just taking a little tiny. I just noticed a little tiny part of Elvis Presley's career because when we were doing the 50s,
very much. Yes,
he was coming in to being famous and having singles and. But I noticed when I was editing the last one, 58 and 59, we were kind of going, "Oh, that was number one. That's not." There was like one called "Don't" or something, and there were quite a few short. And neither of us seemed to know what. And I when I was editing it, it's probably one of the reasons it took me a week to edit that episode because I kept stopping and
I just want to go and listen to that. Yes,
I want to sort of. I need to listen to some of these songs because I need to kind of go, "Oh, you silly boy, you did know 'Don't," but actually a lot of the ones we didn't know about. I'd never heard. I would say no, I've never heard this song before.
Right.
So it's kind of surprising that he had like number ones with songs that don't. Obviously, an Elvis fan would know, but at this point in our lives, we should have been exposed to enough Elvis to know all the big songs. And a song at number one, I would say, is a big song. But I was surprised how. And I was looking in the period we're talking about now. We're talking about the end of his career, and I'm shocked. And I can't see that there is I don't know if perhaps he's just stopped having single hits over here. I mean, whether he just released albums and they charted. I mean, he has more singles in America than he had in the UK in the early to late 70s before he died. But the singles he was releasing in America, they weren't
getting very high. He had he had sort of a few in the 1970. I've Lost You. You Don't Have to Say You Love Me. A live version of The Wonder of You, and then there's Burning Love in 72 and Separate Ways, which I don't recognise.
No.
I know that one. But then, like, that's it. There was the singles in 70, some singles in 72, and then he dies, and then has a hit because he's died. But I kind of didn't realise that he, I thought he was. I mean, there were plenty of albums and singles that did sort of like got to number 35 in America, but not anywhere else. So I don't quite know what was going on with his career as far as releasing things. I kind of thought it was more of a shock when he died. I guess it was a shock, but because he was young. But and I don't know what these chart figures, actually tell us.
No,
I mean we know, like with Mark Bolan, that his big hit days were over, but he was actually still releasing things. They just weren't doing very well. Although one of my favourite Mark Bolan songs, Laser Love, got to number 41. But that's if I was going to pick a T-Rex song, I would pick Laser Love because I think it's a wonderful single. But there just doesn't seem to be much. There's lots.
I do remember, because obviously the big hit that was after he died was Way On Down, wasn't it? Way Down. And I do remember really liking that, and a long time later, really, that was possibly the reason I bought a particular compilation of Elvis, because I just wanted a version of that. And of course, later still, when he gets rediscovered for things like Ocean's 11, and you get a little less conversation, becomes a massive hit. So it's a funny thing, isn't it? You become instant nostalgia sometimes.
I think also some of the ones I think of being 70s ones were actually late 60s ones, like In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds. They're both in 69, and they were big hit because he was still doing his. I think the last few films he did. The last one was almost like a documentary. Well, I remember looking into that. Our Little Less Conversation is 68. The first time it was released. Probably because he was doing Vegas, presumably in the 70s. I don't know if that was a constant thing or just doing it for a few months and having a break, or. I think we're coming towards the end of the episode, but we'll just go on for a little bit longer. I can't remember if Ick joins us for these episodes. I'll have to look back and see whether.
Come on in, boy.
Well, he's become a bit of a. As far as on normal shows, he's quite sort of fine, nice old Ick.
Yes.
But the music ones just bring out the diva in him. And some of the last shows we did, he'd be. I'd kind of dare to suggest that perhaps he did a bit more rehearsal, and I'd just get it back in my face, sort of back chat and stuff. So I can't remember whether I gave up and didn't ask him last time.
Well, if that was the case, he'd be feeling very snubbed.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we will get him back, but I was thinking that we might just nip into 1976. I'm not saying that we've. I mean, this has been more like I use the years more as a topic for bouncing off, but we've I'm sure. So trying to see sort of 76, of course, is notable for that's the year that Brotherhood of Man won the song contest for us.
Kippers for tea.
Yes. Now, I think when I was youngish, after, you know, say in the 80s, say I was 10 or something. If I heard "Save Your Kisses for Me," I probably quite liked that song. But as an older person, it wrangles me that so at least one or two of their songs, it turns out that like that one's got the horrible twist of "Although You're Only Three," and it's like. Or they're singing a song about, and it turns out to be about a dog or something. I hate all those sorts of where there's like a little twist. It's like Tales of the Unexpected. If it was
in musical, 3-minute pop song form.
Yeah, if it had awful. It's like
la 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 love. Then I killed you. Tra la 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 la.
I mean, I can accept. I think on the White Album, the Beatles album. I think Paul McCartney does a song called "Martha, My Dear," and I think Martha was a dog, but I think it's done in a way that it doesn't make me physically sick. And actually, I've seen the picture of the dog, and it's the sort of dog that somebody should write a song about. But I guess.
Well, imagine then again, is it the ABBA one? Was it? Does your mother know? That's always a bit.
I mean.
And there's what's that? What's it? The Ringo Starr one? Is it 16? You're wonderful and you're shut up! Stop it! Stop it! Put it down! Put it down!
Although I guess that was a cover at the time, but I don't know who. I don't know if that song ever seemed appropriate.
Probably not. It's actually there's a lot of really quite dubious. I mean, that one that people go on about, the Pina Colada song. I always think there's some seriously dodgy relationship stuff going on there because they both want to cheat on each other, and just because it happens that they want to cheat with the person that they're actually in a relationship with somehow doesn't make the fact that they were trying to cheat in the first place doesn't make it right in any way, shape or form. Bad song.
I can't remember the title. Is it Like a Woman? I hate that. Is it a Bob Dylan one? Like, Just Like a Woman but she breaks like a little girl or something like that. That creeps me out. I can't stand that. I think that's chiefly responsible for the reason I can't stand Bob Dylan, but also that he can't sing from a lot of his songs. Oops, I didn't say that, but no.
Well, maybe when you're thinking,
I remember.
Well, poetry is still there.
There are one or two songs. Actually, I prefer when the Birds cover. He writes good songs that, except for that first one I mentioned, he writes good songs that the Birds could do much better than he can.
There's a lot of Bob Dylan covers out there.
Well, I remember. Now, I think I missed the first Travelling Wilburys album. It's not an expression or sentence that you hear many people say. But I did buy the second Travelling Wilburys album. Now, the Travelling Wilburys had, it had quite a... had Jeff Lynne, who I like ELO, so, any songs that he might have sung with Travelling Wilburys, that would have been good. Had George Harrison, yes, loved a bit of George Harrison. Tom Petty, had Tom Petty. I mean, Roy Orbison. I don't think Roy Orbison was around by the second one, but I remember being quite disappointed because of all of the. You've got Bob Dylan, of course, part of the Travelling Wilburys, and for some reason somebody decided that Bob should sing lead vocals. And I might be misremembering this wrong, but I think I'm not. The second album, there was far too many songs where Bob was singing lead and the others were doing harmony, and I was like, you've got Jeff Lynne, you've got Tom Petty, you've got George Harrison, come on, how do I have to put up with Bob Dylan singing lead on all these ones? It's sorry.
I don't know, because I do think a song like Subterranean Homesick Blues is a wonderful it's a wonderful piece of writing. But the funny thing is that I think my first version of that I ever heard was probably with Jules Holland, weirdly.
Say the Chipmunk. I was going to say, you were going to say it was when the Chipmunk's doing it, or something, or the Wombles version.
Well, no, it's Jules Holland. It's just a particular Chipmunk, but maybe it was Squeeze. It was. But on some show, I saw him doing that, and I thought, that's a great.
I don't
song.
think
much later, I discovered it was a Dylan.
I don't think I've given Bob Dylan a fair go, to be honest. But I think my experiences have been
so
I
negative
shared a
that
house
I
with someone
haven't
who was
allowed
a
myself.
big fan, big fan, and they did, because I was the same. I was ambivalent, or I'd probably heard very little Bob Dylan at that point. They did me a tape. And I thought, oh yeah, and I put it on in the car and just, yeah, this is really good. But I wouldn't have chosen it for myself. But that's again how you come to things.
But I remember
I can miss out the poets, as I've said before.
I did intend to listen. Is there one where about a boxer or something? I can't remember what that one's called by Bob Dylan. But
the boxer is Simon and Garfunkel.
No, it's not that. I know that one, but
right.
There's or maybe it was in a film where it was used and it was about boxing.
Right.
But there's a song by Bob Dylan. I remember thinking, I quite like this one. I must explore that era of Bob Dylan, and never really did. So
you mean before Judah?
It'll happen
before he went electric.
It'll happen sometime. Bob and I will have a moment, but
you'll suddenly find his back catalogue and find it all wonderful. Yeah. And you won't even know what you're saying.
It's like he's in the room.
It's. I always feel that it's kind of like it's that thing when you're going, it's like an engine. It's like someone's sort of got a chainsaw next door.
I'll listen to the Birds version. Now I've got a list, and we can.
I'm going to get hate mail.
As we're coming to the end, we might just pop in a couple of, I don't know if they are one-hit wonders, but certainly people who, I've never heard of. So I can tell you, as I say, I don't want to repeat too much of what we've done before for 76, but Save All Your Kisses for Me, or Save Your Kisses for Me. It's not all of them, just your kisses.
Just yours,
yes,
not nobody else's.
Yeah. Brotherhood of Man, that was the best-selling single of 1976. And then Don't Go Breaking My Heart, Elton John and Kiki D. We probably need to talk about, you mentioned Elton John earlier, we probably need to talk about Elton John in some later episode, because that's sort of, because Elton John's one of those people who obviously had he was around like being a session singer, then he was successful, then he had a period, perhaps late 70s, or like, I remember there was a period, and the same with Queen, where the singles weren't doing very well, and then of course both Queen and Elton John came back and rallied. So
well, I'm interesting because I've got all the Queen CDs, but I can barely bring myself to put The Miracle on. I find The Miracle is just awful. It's just one of those, and yet it's got one of my favourite tracks is on that album, but as an album generally I find it very hard. And funnily enough, the one that most people dislike, the disco one, Hot Space, I think has some nice stuff on there. So what do I know? Because the Game is fabulous.
I'm not very good with Queen albums in that I've never got into Queen and an album, even though I own some of them. I've never
you wouldn't know what was on which. No, I know what you mean. But those ones that are the less popular ones. I mean, funnily enough, if I've got 35 minutes to spare, I tend to put Flash Gordon. So what do I know?
but we will talk about Elton maybe next time. But
Elton Wellesby and his famous lapels. Yes.
But
no, not that one.
But I can tell you, like the fourth. I'm skipping third deliberately because I want to look at this band. The fourth highest selling single in 1976 was Dancing Queen by ABBA. The fifth was a little bit more by Dr. Hook. That wasn't their only hit by any means. And funnily enough...
that's pub singer stuff, isn't it?
The funny thing is, that even though that's the fifth biggest selling single, a little bit more, it only reached number 2. So and all of the songs in the top 13, other than that, reached number 1. So it must have been a week when selling number 2.
Yeah, I just think it probably sold a lot over a long period of time. That's the thing. My sister liked Dr. Hook. I think she certainly had an LP of Dr. Hook.
Number 6 was If You Leave Me Now, Chicago. Number 7 was Fernando by ABBA. Okay. I Love to Love, My Baby Loves to Dance by Tina Charles is number 8. Okay. The Roussos Phenomenon EP by Demis Roussos.
Demi.
I don't know if it is.
I like Demis Roussos.
I don't know what.
Ange likes Demis Roussos. Yeah.
There's probably a particular.
Immortalised in a caftan.
There's probably a particular. Oh, is it Forever and Ever that's on that one? Yes. And then. Number 10, December 1963, Oh What a Night by the Four Seasons. So those are the top 10 singles, except I've still left that one out. We've got other bands like Shwaddy Waddy doing well. We've got Rod Stewart, we've got the Wurzels, we've got all sorts. Leo Sayer, You Make Me Feel Like Dancing. But number 3, I want to finish with this because I don't know. It's one of those things like where we say, well, I don't know that song. You might know the song. It's the third biggest selling single. It's called Mississippi by Pussycat.
Oh, right. Mississippi.
I don't know. So we're going to have a look.
Okay. Right, yeah.
Mississippi is a song by Dutch country pop band Pussycat. Right. It was the group's first number one in their home country, as well as their only number one single in most countries. And in New Zealand and South Africa, Mississippi was their first of 2 number one singles. It was the best-selling single of 1977 in the Latin nation.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, I need to find out a bit more about the actual band. Now, there looks like there's 4... everyone's got long hair. I was going to say... I say that it looks like there's 3 women and 4 men, but I mistook one of the men for a woman because his hair was so long.
Okay. There you sounded like my dad now.
Well, the picture is really small on Wikipedia, so I'm peering.
What's that monkey song?
Yeah.
And you go to a party and you can't tell the boys from the girls. That one. Laugh.
3 sisters. They were telephone operators in Limburg.
Right.
And looks like the men were in a group called Scum. And one of them was in a group called Ricky Rendell and his Centurions.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I was just saying, oops, I'm just trying. Sorry, I clicked something. I just wonder if they did have any other hits. They had quite a few albums between 76 and 83.
Right.
Don't think they even released. It could be a bit like they were like the Shocking Blue of the late the late 70s, but or the later 70s. They did have one other hit in the UK called Smile. It was a double A side. Smile. What did they do to the people? That got to number 24.
Smile being, of course, the original band name
Queen.
That the Queen people were in. Yes.
You know how
everything's connected.
You know how sometimes when we did the music episodes, we'd boggle at the names of some of the singles, or they'd make sense.
Yeah.
And, so some of Pussycat's singles, I say, they did well in the Netherlands and had other hits in the Netherlands. But so we've got what else? We've got My Broken Souvenirs. That's
okay.
Well, that got to number 2 in Netherlands. If You Ever Come to Amsterdam, with a double A side of You Must Have a Beautiful Baby. If you ever come to Amsterdam, you must have a beautiful baby.
You must have a beautiful baby. There you go. There's a reason not to travel.
Yes, we've got Wet Day in September. That sounds very inspiring. We've got Une Chambre pour la Nuit.
Right. And Room for the Night.
Yeah, and Teenage Queen. Teenage Queen.
Okay.
But so yes, they did.
All in all,
they did well to have the third highest selling single of 1976. But I think there were plenty more areas we can explore, and big bands, small bands, some as big as your head. But I think we will keep the rest of 76 and beyond for another episode and see where it leads us. I hope
repeat ourselves too much. I think we went in so many different directions that it would be unlikely, and I hope
we've meandered.
Yes, I hope the listeners enjoyed. And we will be back for more ramblings of the late 70s, the big hitters and Pussycat was
small hitters.
Well, yes. Pussycat was a big hitter in a way. It's just history does not remember them in quite the same way. Yeah, anyway, thank you, Martin, and
always a pleasure.
And I will see what Ick is up to, whether he's going to sing us anything. But okay. Just hold on, we might have Ick's version of. I mean, I'm sure he's done David Bowie before now, anyway, and in previous episodes. But
well, absolutely,
I'll speak to his agent. I'll speak to his agent anyway. So,
okay,
okie dokie. Take care, listeners, and we'll be back again soon. Bye bye.
Yeah, goodbye. Take care.
Bye. How are you? Oh, I'm alright, Cromitty. How are you? I'm okay. I just wondered why you were standing out here in the cold. Oh, I'm just not sure. I'm trying to build up, some sort of confidence. What are you doing out here? Oh, I was just doing my afternoon walk. Even this time of year, I go out and get some exercise. Oh, yeah. Well, listeners, we're standing outside Ick's spaceship near the canal path. Yes, that's right, Paul. I didn't know you were speaking to the listeners. Oh, yeah, Of course, it should be said that this is where Toppy and I saw the vampire joggers that time. Oh, yes, I keep forgetting about that. Still, it is it's something that bothers me. You still have that device, don't you? The one that's supposed to make you immune from them contacting you. Yes, Paul, that's true. But why is it that you are loitering out here? It's getting dark. I want to go in. What? Go in where? To the spaceship? Yes, that's right. Well, why don't you just do that? Is Ick not there? Have you rung the doorbell? I haven't rung the doorbell. No, I'm just building up to it. What is going on, Paul? Come on. Well, Martin and I just recorded an episode about 1970s music where we kind of ramble from topic to topic, band to band. We recorded, I hadn't done much preparation, but I'd done no preparation, and at time of recording, I haven't even edited the first episode, so I can't remember what we said. It was a little bit of a quandary. I don't think that we've said the same things twice, but if we have, well, I'll try and distract the listeners by putting some shiny paper up or something. Oh, like magpies. Yeah, like magpies. I'm sure listeners can be distracted, so they don't realise they're hearing the same episode twice. Oh, Paul, I'm sure it's not the case. Well, no, we bounced around so many different subjects. I don't think that we'll have repeated ourselves. But anyway, but what is the issue, Paul? Why are you so concerned? Well, because I haven't edited the first episode at time of recording, I can't remember if we had Ick back on the show. Oh, I see. Yes. I can't remember if we got Ick to come and sing some of the songs. The thing is, we've done, the 70s before in a different way. This is more, it's a different type of conversation. I did the 70s with Nick, but it was more
here are the number ones, and whereas Martin and I were talking about Roxy Music, or we're talking about David Bowie, or and I don't know if I should ask Ick to come back. I see what you mean, but you're concerned. You can't remember what happened with the first episode. No, I can't tell. I don't think we did. I can't see a file. I've got myself into a right old tizzy. Oh, Paul, I'd just go in if I were you. Yeah. I mean, Ick's a good friend. I mean, he's such a nice guy, generally. Oh, I think I know what you mean, Paul. He's a nice guy, but when you do the music episodes, over the years he's become quite the diva. He has, yes. God, it's not just me. He has become a bit of a diva about it. He does very little rehearsal. He doesn't learn the words. He barely learns the tunes. He just sings whatever comes to his... And then when I dare to sort of call him out on it, he goes, he just loses it. Yes, Paul, well, have you ever considered, just singing it yourself? Or maybe Yeti Uncle John and I could be your choir. Yeah. Or there's Martin. I mean, Martin might do it, but I just feel wrong. What if Ick finds out? He'll be furious if it turns out he did want to do it. Oh dear, Paul. Well, I can hear the theme music coming. I think you'll have to decide. I will. I'll decide once the end theme music's playing whether I'm going in or not. Oh golly. Oh dear, Paul. Well, I understand why you're concerned. Yeah, I'm glad you do. Oh dear.
I gotta go now! Bye!
I want to go with you!
Gotta go! Bye!
Goodbye, 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 goodbye.
It's been good, but yeah, definitely time to come home now.
Wow. Really? No kidding.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
This show is part of the Pride 48 network. Find more shows over at pride48.com.
Oh dear. What's going on now? Oh, it's the Shy Life podcast.
Let's go.
I have a voice. I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice. We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
UnivazPods.net.
Guys, what's going on? Why are you two hanging around outside the spaceship? You'll get freezing. Well, Yeti Uncle John, I was just on a walk. Paul is here to see Ick, but he's nervous. He's what? Nervous? Yes, I'm nervous because I want to ask Ick a favour, but I'm not sure if I should. I'm not sure if well, Paul has done an episode with Martin. You know how Martin Holmes, that is, not Sniffy Martin. Yes, all right. What, the music episodes? Yes, you've been on some of them, Yeti Uncle John. You know how Ick sings like a montage of hits from whatever year we're talking about. Oh yes. He doesn't do it very well. Don't let him hear you say that. So you know that this is going on. And anyway, the episodes I'm doing with Martin Holmes at the moment, they're more general music chats about particular bands and things. I don't remember if we asked Ick to be involved last time, or whether we should ask. Or I feel like I should tell him. I just don't know. Oh, you think he might be cross? Yes, he thinks he might be cross. Yeah, he might be cross. You're right there. Oh, the spotlight's gone on.
Who's out there? Who is it? Hey? I hope it's not any yoga vampires. Who's there?
Well, Paul? No, I'm scared. I don't want to say anything.
Who is it?
Go on, Paul. Speak to him. No, I'm scared.
Hello? see something out there. What's going on?
Moo. Moo. What? Ba. Ba. Are we really doing this? Cluck, cluck, cluck. Cluck, cluck, cluck.
Oh, it's just a passing farm. Okay. I'll go back inside. How strange. Anyway, never mind. I've got things to do.
Well, I can't believe you pretended to be a cow. Well, you just pretended to be a sheep. Yes, and I just pretended to be a chicken. The strange things you make me do, Paul. You see, you were just as scared as I was. Well, maybe you don't do anything. He'll never find out. I'm pretty sure he doesn't listen to your show. No, I think that was very unlikely, Paul. Why would he? Thanks, guys. Because we had a nice chat and it's interesting. Oh, yes, well, not to eek. No, obviously not to eek. He doesn't come from around here, if he shows as much interest in the singing that he does as he does to, what I mean. Yes, yes. If he can't be bothered to learn the words, he probably doesn't even listen to the episodes. All right, I get that. All right, well, it's time to finish the episode. Sorry, listeners, no eek this time. Well, come back to the Magpie Hut. Have a cup of tea or something. That would be lovely, Yeti Uncle John. Yes, I think we'll do that. Bye for now, listeners. Oh, yeah. Goodbye, listeners. Oh, goodbye, listeners. Goodbye. Bye now.
What are those three up to? Making cow noises, making sheep noises, making chicken noises. They've really lost it now. Oh dear. I don't know. Humans. Oh, gosh. Oh, dear.
Ew. What's that smell? Oh, I think that was a wonderful episode. Wow, that was a good episode.
Oh, yeah. That's perfectly normal. On the Shy Life Podcast. Perfectly normal.
Sometimes I just really wonder about the show. I really do. 634. This is just the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
634. What? I'm talking.
634.